So Davies, Dio, Cortes, and Jack all good to go for this weekend. Tom Lawrence not available for this weekend, but no, he's not injured, guys. Don't worry, he is not injured or out. So just don't worry about that. We'll come to that in a minute. Lots of interesting takes from Phillipe Clement's press conference. Lots of things around the Willie Collum question about Willie Collum obviously refereeing this weekend against Ayr United. Some very interesting takes on the Willie situation. Actually, that sounds really bad on the Willie Collum situation. Some interesting questions as well about preparing for pre-season and fitness. Obviously, a couple of stupid questions around that, but you can guess who asked those. Anyway, let's talk first of all a little bit about who is available, who is not available. Phillipe Clement talked about the fact that Ben Davies will be back and will be available for the first time in a while for the game. So there's a good chance possibly with Leon Balogun been out, and him talking again about rotation of players and around fitness and wanting to keep players fit and giving players the opportunity to train to improve their fitness continually. And we'll talk a little bit about that shortly and what he had to say about his satisfaction, which he said was a difficult word with Rangers players' fitness. We'll talk a little bit about that. But there's a chance possibly Davies could be ready to go right from the beginning, with John Suter, Leo, Connor Goldson there, and obviously Leon Balogun out. There could be a case of resting one or both of those players for this weekend's game, as especially, again, he did emphasise the need for rotation. He said that Lawrence was not available. It was a precaution, not an injury. It was the same situation as Ryan Jack. He talked very much about the fact that, with these players that have these injury histories, very sensible what he said. He talked about the fact that these players have an injury history. They need to be careful with them. They need to make sure that these players are ready to go and are available, and they don't risk the chances of them getting injured again. I think, the more muscle fatigue you get, the more wear and tear you get on your muscles, the more chance you have of getting injured. So a very sensible attitude from Phillipe Clement there. And he said that, in terms of Jack and in terms of Lawrence, it had been a three-way discussion between himself, the medical staff, and the performance staff as well. I wonder if that new lad from Brighton who is having an input, the guy's name escapes me at the moment, but he's having an input on these players' availability and training programs. Certainly I think something that Phillipe Clement is very hot on, isn't it? On player fitness, on player readiness to play, on player availability. And he seems to be taking it very easily and trying to make sure that his squad is kept fit, not only through rotation, but these players that do have these injury histories, about not risking them and playing them game after game after game. That seems to be the reason why Lawrence is not available. Very interesting indeed. And there was obviously some talk around the whole Ayr game this weekend. He said that, Ayr it's always a challenge no matter who you play. And he's right. Every team will raises their game coming into a cup tie. Cups are notoriously tricky events, aren't they? I can remember, the great Graham Souness team once losing to Hamilton Accies in the cup and getting knocked out when they were conquering all before them in the league. I can remember, down south, non-league teams putting out Premier League teams or First Division teams as then was, Sutton United knocking out cup holders Coventry City. I think they put out Tottenham one year as well. So, there's always that penchant for a shock, isn't there? And a giant killing, as it's known, a cup set seems to be the new trendy term for it. So he talked about the fact that you need to show quality, which obviously is something that we do have in abundance. Certainly, the players that we have and the players that we're able to call on are that complete level above what Ayr have. He talked about mentality again, and again, it's about having that right mentality, having that winning mentality, having that determination, having that focus, having that belief, and having that that thought that no matter who is in front of you, you have to go out and do your very best and not take anyone for granted or let anyone, in the case of perhaps some of those teams in Europe or even that lot across the city, sort of overwhelm you. And that is right. And he also talked about having respect as well, which is, if you don't have respect for a lower league team, that's how cup sets or upsets happen, isn't it? When you go into a game, you think, oh, well, this is going to be easy. It's just Ayr, it's just Dunbar, it's just Queen's Park, it's just Partick Thistle, it's just whoever, it's just Bonnie Rig Rose in the case, I suppose, of Aberdeen. You've got a situation where you could get knocked out. You could obviously be the victim of a shock. And he is right. You've got to have respect. Of course, the Scott Brown question was raised again. Talk about Scott Brown, who obviously has a long history of playing against Rangers. Phillipe Clement was absolutely brilliant in his response to that question. He said that I've read now that Scott Brown has a love for Rangers now. I like anybody who loves Rangers, so it will be all good on the sidelines. An absolutely superb response from Big Phil to that question. Again, it's one of those questions where the media are clearly looking to make mischief, looking for a soundbite answer, looking for an answer where they can get a bit of a copy out of it. They can get a bit of Rangers manager slaughters Scott Brown, Rangers manager slaughters ex-Celtic player, blah blah blah. But Phil Clement, absolutely superb, professional as always, gives the correct answer, gives a great answer there. Really does put that reporter back in his place, back in his box. I think had it been the original incumbent this season, we might have had a very different response and probably a ridiculous response, knowing Michael Beale, to that question, but an excellent response from Phillipe Clement to that question. Of course, the subject of the Dujon Sterling red card came up again, reading a lot of absolute crap on social media about it today. Mainly, I'm glad to say, from that lot rather than from our own fans, although there are still one or two of our own so-called Rangers fans who think it was a red card. Phillipe Clement says he doesn't want to lose players, which obviously is an obvious one. He says we have to accept decisions, which again is a situation. But you kind of get from what he was saying that he isn't happy at all with the outcome of what has happened. Now, he didn't directly say it because he's way too professional. He's not going to get himself in bother. He's not going to come out and say the SFA got it wrong, that the decision was wrong, etc., because he's going to put himself at risk of being fined, of getting a touchline ban, of all sorts of sanctions. And we all know that the SFA will probably be looking for any opportunity they can to disadvantage us in the run-in. He said that there needs to be clarity. He says this was obviously further emphasised by the fact there had to be a VAR check. He said the club were very confident going into the appeal because he had seen tackles in other games very similar to the Sterling tackle that had ended in a yellow card. There we go, guys. So although all those of you out there who are saying it was a straight red, no debating it, go and watch some of the other tackles that get yellow carded that are not by Rangers players, and then tell me it was a red card. He said the problem is there are a lot of grey areas. He said clarity is very important, and there are still way too many grey areas on these things, which is kind of his way, I think, of saying that nothing has been cleared up yet. Nothing is clear. Nothing is right about this decision, and it isn't. We know. I don't want to talk about it particularly again, but it was a disgrace, a decision, and a disgrace of an appeal, and the SFA are an absolute disgrace, and we know that. He talked about the fact as well that he felt that people have been very much mistaken by what VAR brings. Look, we could do a whole podcast on VAR and on how VAR is used. And the problem is that there is no standard system for VAR. The VAR that is used in Europe is different to the VAR that's used in the English Premier League. The VAR in the English Premier League is different to the VAR that's used in Scotland. And the VAR in Scotland is different to the league, and so on and so forth. He said that, that people were wrong to think that VAR would get rid of all the grey areas. He said that was never going to happen. He said there will always be those grey areas in football. He said that is what the game is at the end of the day. And I think a lot of people getting too hung up on these VAR decisions. Yes, there is a lot of weaknesses to VAR. Yes, there is a lot of issues with it in terms of the time it takes to make decisions, over the fact that it is not having, I think, a consistency, I think, is one of the big things, that a decision one week that goes as a penalty, the next week is not a penalty. A decision that goes as a free kick or as a yellow turn to a red, or a red reversed one week is not the same the next week. There is just no consistency. I think it is one of the big things around the VAR controversy in Scotland at this moment in time. And also the fact that it seems that every decision that is not VAR reviewed, the fact that a couple of penalties if you're wearing a certain colour are reviewed, but a couple of penalties if you're wearing a different colour are not reviewed. It depends, obviously, on what colour you're wearing and which team you play for, to whether that VAR check is undertaken. That's not what Phillipe Clement said. That's my words, not Phillipe Clement's. He was asked about the blue cards as well. And I think he spoke for, I think, a lot of football fans on this blue card thing. It is a joke. It's an absolute joke. It's a disaster waiting to happen. It is very, look, the 10-minute sin bin is used very well in rugby, and it can be used in rugby. Rugby has natural stop-starts to it. They have time on, time off. It doesn't matter if the game is stopped for a period of time in rugby, because it doesn't always have that fluidity, rugby union or rugby league, to the same extent. So football needs to have that fluidity. And Phillipe Clement was absolutely spot on with what he said. He talked about the fact that he said, well, where do we go with this? He says, is it players out for 10 minutes from when the card's given, or when they go off, or is it 10 minutes of play? How is that 10 minutes going to be applied? He also said, how long does it take to get players off at times as well? that is more opportunity to waste more time. He said he's not a fan of it at all. He said we have a very good product in football. It's a fluid product. He said that the more the game stops, he says the more the game is broken up, the less of a good product you have. He says it breaks the game up too much, and it is not a good idea. Look, I've got to say I wholeheartedly agree with what Phillipe Clement is saying in this instance. It is an absolutely ridiculously stupid idea. Whoever's come up with this blue card idea needs to have their head read or be told to get out, because it is a ridiculous idea. I mean, it's not just that for me, and this is me talking here, that it breaks up the game and it slows the game down. It's yet another, with VAR, with cards, with arguments over cards, with arguments over decisions that all break up the game. It's another chance to slow the game down, to stop the game, to allow time wasting to go on, to really spoil what is meant to be a quick, fast game that football is meant to be. It will destroy games. It will make games unwatchable, in my opinion. It's not only that, but it's also the fact that referees in Scotland, I'm sure, I don't watch, obviously, European football to a great extent, but, I watch a lot of Scottish football. The referees in Scotland are absolutely hopeless at using yellow and red cards. So what makes people think they can use blue cards? To me, it's a joke. It's an utter joke. It's a ridiculous idea. And Phillipe Clement is 100% correct when he says it is not a good idea at all. Now, of course, he had to be asked about the Willie Collum issue. Now, there was two parts to this question. He was asked twice about this, really. First of all, he was asked, is he unhappy that Willie Collum is refereeing the game this weekend, given what the club had asked that Willie doesn't referee any more games for Rangers this season. He said that he was happy that Collum was refereeing. He said that if for one moment I thought the referee was not neutral, was biased, I would quit. Which is telling, isn't it? The fact that he thinks that he has a belief, I think, there, and you can talk about that belief. You can talk about that belief that that all referees are neutral, all referees are independent, and I suppose we all need to believe that. We all need to hope that is true. There is perhaps an innocence because of what he comes from, Belgian football, he comes from French football, where there is perhaps not I've got to be careful what I say here. There is perhaps not the allegiances to certain things that there are here in Scotland. So, look, it's a strange one. He was asked whether he was involved in the discussions about that statement that was given, the statement that Rangers made that they don't want Willie Collum to referee any more of their games. He said he was not involved in those discussions at all, but would like to be involved in future discussions, which is very interesting that the manager was not involved in any of the discussions Willie Collum and whether Willie Collum should referee any further Rangers games. Phillipe Clement went on to say as well, in reference to that, when he was asked again about it, he says, look, for me, he said there was a fault made in that game. It was a handball. It was a clear handball. We all could see that. But he says, we all make mistakes. We can move on. This is a new chance for a new chapter in this story, a chance to move on again. He says, we don't live in the past. He said, next game has to be the focus. We need to stop looking back towards that game, which is an interesting response, a very diplomatic response towards the appointment of Willie Collum as a match official. I think, it was always going to happen that Willie Collum would be appointed as an official for a Rangers game. They were never going to listen to us in terms of not allowing him to referee games. They're not going to allow themselves to be dictated to by clubs as to who can and can't referee games. On the Leon Balogun situation, he said that Leon has seen a specialist and will be back next week. He said that Leon will have to have a mask fitted, and then obviously that mask will then need to be worked with and adapted to make sure it's comfortable for Leon to wear. So he says he doesn't know whether it'll be the Ross County game on Wednesday or whether it'll be the game on Sunday against St Johnstone, where he will be available to play. But Leon will be back in training next week. He has seen a specialist, but will need to wear a mask. So great news that Big Leon is back. I think, if you look at it, Big Leon has been one of our best players this season, by far one of our best players this season, and to have him back is great news. He was also asked about Diomande and Cortes And he was asked, would they be available? Are they available to play? He said that both Mohamed Diomande and Oscar Cortes can start. He said, but were not able to play the full 90 minutes. So it's good news that both Mo Diomande and Oscar Cortes are both available. I think given him talking about rotation, there's a strong chance we could actually see Diomande and Cortes in the starting lineup on Saturday against Ayr United. I think that is a strong possibility. Again, I think it'll be great. It'd be a great chance for them to perhaps play against a lesser opponent, to settle in more to the Scottish game, to give them a chance to get some minutes into their legs, to get their match fitness up. This was something that was always going to be needed. If you talk about Cortes, he's played 4 times for Lens this season, mostly from the bench. Diomande hasn't played competitively. Okay, the other night he came on, but actually a full competitive game since November for Norgesland. So look, it's good news for me that they are both available to start. They both could start. I mean, I think we can and possibly will see them in the starting lineup on Saturday against Ayr United. He was asked about the fitness issue again, something that seems to come up time and time again at these news conferences about what his attitude is towards the fitness. Is injuries and everything. I'm sure he's absolutely sick to death of talking about fitness and injuries. Scott Wright was the player who was brought out to speak to the media beforehand, and he said that that La Manga had been great as a chance for the players to get to understand Phillipe Clement's tactics, his fitness expectations, his expectations for the players, etc., etc. To which point then some journalist asked, "Are you satisfied with fitness?" He said in response to this is a great answer. He said, "Satisfied is a difficult word." I think is code for saying no, he isn't happy with the fitness. No, he isn't happy with the injury history of this squad. He is used to having 90% availability, and he's right to say that. There has been clearly, I think, an improvement in the fitness of the squad. You can see that on a match day. You can see the work rate, the ethic, the work ethic, their ability to keep running for 90 minutes as to their fitness. But the injury issue is still there and prevalent. And obviously, the fitter you are, the less chance you've got of getting that injuries. He said that you've got to get the best out of it. He says it's big margins. He says in all the squad. He said found it useful being in La Manga. He said there is need for rotation. He says due to the games been every few days. He says because we rotate, we're therefore allowing some players to train rather than play, which is what they need. He says we need more weeks like La Manga. We need obviously that to happen so that we can raise fitness levels further and raise those expectations, which is quite clear that he's not still satisfied with Rangers' fitness at this point. He did talk about the fact that there was planning going on for next season already, and pre-season games have clearly been started to be planned for the club. One great point that he made was that someone asked him about the fact that did he feel that in Scotland that we value domestic cups more than any others, and he said that in Scotland, he said that he felt that football was really in the veins, was his word. And he said we seem to value history and tradition more than a lot of other nations. He said that it is, he's very impressed by the fact that football is so much part of everything in this country. He says something he loves. He's another reason why he loves being at this club. Some really interesting points there from Phillipe Clement. Overall, again, another fabulous conference from Phillipe Clement. Very professional, very much to the point. It does sound like, again, there'll be rotation this weekend. A good chance perhaps that Diomande and Cortes could play at the weekend. Obviously, as well, Ben Davies is available. Ryan Jack is available. Tom Lawrence obviously will not be used, therefore meaning I think that Cantwell will start in that 10 role. Could we also perhaps see Nicholas Raskin in the 8 role, or will Diomande start in the 8 or Diomande in the 10? Who knows? It will certainly be an interesting squad selection when that team actually drops before the Ayr game at Ibrox on Saturday evening. Well, guys, let me know what you think in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet done so, please hit that sub and help the channel to keep on growing. Thank you for watching. And as always, on the way out, if you can do me 2 favors. Number 1, smash the like. And number 2, always remember, we are the people.